Let's get right to it this afternoon with our panel. Joe Williams is White House reporter for Politico. He joins us from Washington. And joining me here in New York is Krystal Ball, who's an MSNBC contributor and a Democratic strategist. Joe, if I can start with you. You just heard Newt's Valentine's Day plans with his wife, Callista. Undoubtedly some Tiffany's
well,
for her.
Part of them anyway, which is as much as we care to hear.
Yeah, or indeed we can cope with. There's possibly something from Tiffany's thrown in, we don't know. But based off the past few weeks, shouldn't he be reconnecting with his campaign rather than with his wife?
Well, one would think, especially after the shellacking he took in Florida, his money has kind of dried up. Sheldon Adelson reportedly has closed the checkbook. Mitt reportedly is seeking to get small donors on board. So those are the ones who he needs to show some love to. But as always, he's run this unconventional, some might even call it well, I don't even know what you might be able to call it.
How about disastrous? He's at 10% today.
Well, yes, exactly. And I was thinking political malpractice, given all the stumbles that he's had and the self-inflicted wounds. He aims to get back on track, and clearly it seems as he's focusing his energies on Super Tuesday, on Florida, where he actually holds a lead in one primary. So that probably is where he's trying to make his last stand.
Indeed. Chris, while Newt's enjoying entertaining Callista, as we said, possibly some Tiffany's thrown in or whatever, who knows, Santorum is really surging. Is Santorum, do you think, the genuine conservative? Is he the one who can really challenge Romney?
I think he is the last man standing in terms of conservative alternatives.
That's not the same thing, though, is it?
It's not the same thing. And the problem is, as it always has been within this race, as soon as someone starts to surge, Mitt Romney pulls out the checkbook, his super PAC pulls out the checkbook, and they hammer that person on the airwaves. And we've already seen reports of something like $500,000 worth of ads to be aired in Michigan. I think that's going to be tough for Rick Santorum to overcome. Now, he does have advantages in the state, and one thing I do want to point out, in most of these states, the amount of middle-class voters, which I'll say is the people who are about $50,000 to $100,000 demographic, they've been about 37% of the vote. In Michigan, it's going to be more like 44%, and that's a group that Rick Santorum has done very well with, and Mitt Romney has done very poorly with, which is also going to be consequential for the general election. So that is a strength that Rick Santorum brings to the state.
Joe, Rick Santorum says he's a conservative, I guess twice in a 30-second ad that's been released today and every 15 seconds when you speak to him personally. But we all know it's Mitt Romney, isn't it, that needs to build that conservative case for voters.
Well, and to use the Valentine's Day analogy, that's why the GOP base has yet to put a ring on it. They don't like the way he's going. They want someone who's sincere. And it's interesting that Santorum is probably trying to bolster against the coming Death Star lasers from Mitt Romney's well-funded machine. So it's interesting that he's trying to set himself up and pre-butt, if you will, those attacks. But what's also interesting to me is the fact that Santorum basically won the last three primaries running with a very strong socially conservative message, anti-abortion, anti-birth control, some anti-feminism tropes thrown in there as well. But he's surging in Michigan on the strength of that and not on an economic message.
Right.
In one of the states hardest hit by unemployment, hardest hit by the manufacturing decline, and a lot of people underwater in their homes there. You would figure Romney, having all his ties to the state, as well as basing his campaign on his business experience, would be the guy taking the lead there.
And yet it's tough for him, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But, you know, Mitt Romney, he said he was severely conservative at CPAC. Isn't that enough for you guys?
Well, indeed. Some would say his campaign is severely constipated. But, Krystal, I want to turn now to the comments made by Fox News contributor Liz Trotter. We've heard Rick Santorum talking about women not being appropriately placed in battle situations, and he opposes that. She says that in the spike in sexual assaults in the military, she asked, what did they expect? What did women expect? Now, isn't that the same argument that's used by people when they see a woman in a skirt that's not basically at her ankles? Well, she was asking for it.
Oh, absolutely. It's the same blame the victim mentality that truly we shouldn't be surprised from the far right, because just look at how they responded to the Herman Cain controversy. The immediate instinct was not to look and say, okay, what's the truth of these allegations? The immediate instinct was to blame the women, to slam them, to go through their personal history, to try to degrade them and diminish them. I mean, that's the instinct that's there. And it speaks to a larger problem coming from the far right, and certainly Rick Santorum has this issue.
Isn't that, Joe, a problem for Rick Santorum?
Well, it's going to be a problem coming out of the primary.
Right.
The conservative women, by and large, are kind of used to this sort of thing, and they accept that notion. But I want to talk more about what Krystal is saying. A lot of the attacks and the notion that this is what happens when you put women in frontline positions, it's almost absurd on its face, because most of these attacks happen in rear guard. They happen in operating bases that are not, well, not completely safe, but certainly aren't right on the front lines.
Right.
They happen among support personnel. They happen among personnel coming back from R&R. The discipline breakdown. And the other problem is the Army brass has not seriously addressed this issue, addressed the breakdown in discipline among the men, and taken their concerns seriously. So I think it's something that Santorum's going to have to answer for with moderate women should he become the nominee, and something the party in general is going to have to talk about once the general election campaign starts.
Republicans have an issue with women voters. I mean, right now, if you look at the polling, Mitt Romney's actually beating the president by about 5 points with men, losing by 21 points with women.
Not a good
it's
position.
It's a major problem.
Krystal Ball and Joe Williams, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.